All information given in this episode is for educational purposes and should not be tried prior to consulting a licensed physician and or certified state or accrediting bodies. We encourage all listeners to research, talk, and make all inquiries to all of the important professionals and governing bodies before acting on any information heard on the De La Fit podcast. Any action taken by any listener is done by and under their own omission and action, whether conscious to the results positive or not.
Tuned in to the De La Fit podcasts, 360 degrees of holistic fitness and health, all in one podcast.
Salutations and proclamations. It is I, it is you, it is us, it is we. Together we make up the digital family that is the De La Fit podcast. I'm your host, Philly's #1 son, aka the body alchemist, Sun Moon Bay, bringing you another podcast excursion. Welcome everybody back to the 360 degrees of holistic fitness and health. Happy Friday to you. I hope that your week was filled with nothing but pure awesomeness. We're going to have a great conversation today. We have got special guest Tricia Nelson, and she is going to be talking with us about emotional eating and how to break up with Ben and Jerry. That's right. Put that ice cream down, throw away those chips. It's time to get down to business. And we're going to figure this out today. Tricia is going to help us do that. Before we get into this conversation, I'd just like to take the time out to thank all of our listeners for coming and tuning in with us today. We thank you all. We appreciate all of you. We appreciate all the emails and all the communication that you've given us. You all give us the inspiration to continue to do this awesome work. And inspiration and hope is what's needed in order to continue into the world. So many different things taking place. We're dealing with so much social unrest, fear, trauma, miseducation, ignorance. Then stress is going to be the result. We already live in a rather stressful society in the beginning. You have to get up. Well, pardon me. Let me backtrack. At one point, we were getting up, going to work, rushing through traffic. If you lived in a busy inner city like New York or Philadelphia, you were on the trains or the trolleys or whatever method of transportation you would take to get to work, battling through crowds of people during rush hour just to get to your cubicle or wherever it is that you comfortably worked, or perhaps uncomfortably, to sit down, work, go to lunch, then come back, work some more, and go home through some more rush hour. Much has changed. A pandemic swept across the globe, making humanity be still. But still, even with that slight pause in our movement, we are still dealing with nothing but countless amounts of stress. How will our bills be paid? How will my children's education be affected? How will I be able to put food on the table? These are all relevant and prevalent situations that we are all right now dealing with. Even myself as a podcaster has had to deal with this situation. I've reminded people before we initially had did a progressive move to a downtown Philadelphia studio. What was looking like a awesome moment for 2020, in fact, just was a sidestep or perhaps a slight pause, but the stress was still there. So with all of that, stress being the theme of this week and dealing with it, how do we begin to deal with stress? How do we take the bull by the proverbial horns and slow ourselves down so that we don't hurt ourselves? Because when we stress, we put countless amount of negativity throughout our body. There's so much going on. It's not just mental. It affects our physical. It affects everything. There are so many different ways to deal with stress, but even those ways have been affected. At one point, some of us would go to the gym or perhaps go running or doing exercise. But with most gyms being closed, how do you continue to effectively deal with the stress? What do? Some of us have been very creative in dealing with these certain problematic issues that we are currently all engaged in. But others are resulting to other means that aren't necessarily healthy. Again, a very apt segue with our guest. So up next, we're going to be getting into the thick of things and bringing on our special guest, internationally acclaimed author, transformational speaker, and emotional eating expert, not to mention host of the popular podcast, The Heal Your Hunger Show, Tricia Nelson. Tricia Nelson is a highly regarded speaker and has been featured on NBC, CBS, KTLA, Fox, and Discovery Health. And she has taken time out of her busy schedule to sit down and speak with us. So I can't wait to sit down with Tricia and get some vital information from her. That interview coming up next. De La Fit Podcast is sponsored by Mountain Made CBD. Mountain Made is changing the CBD game by offering a line of high-dose CBD tablets at an affordable price. Their products are THC-free and third-party tested for accuracy, cleanliness, and potency. Their products, which ship nationwide, include Build for CBD saturation, Boost for precision titration, Recovery for rest and rehab. With 9 years experience in hemp and fitness, Mountain Made's founders are focused on creating a quality product to help those who live an activated lifestyle. Check out www.mountainmade.life to find out more about how their products can help you crush life. Remember, their products ship nationwide. Go check out their website today and follow them on social media at MNTMADE. I started using Mountain Made's Build CBD tablets to help me with the injury in my elbow. And let me tell you something, not only is the injury subsided, but now I can do push-ups and I'm back to bench pressing. So I encourage anybody who's interested to look up, check out Mountain Made and all their products. I think you'll be glad you did. What's going on, everybody? It's Philly's #1 son. Listen, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's a creation tool that allows you how to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a stunning podcast in one place. So listen, if you want to be like me and have your own podcast, go to anchor.com. That's anchor.com.
You're now tuned in to the De La Fit Podcast.
Welcome back to the 360 Degrees of Holistic Fitness and Health. That is the De La Fit Podcast. Today, we are joined by Tricia Nielsen. She is an internationally acclaimed author, transformational speaker, and emotional eating expert. Tricia lost 50 pounds by identifying and healing the underlying causes of her emotional eating. She has spent over 30 years researching the hidden cause of the addictive personality. Tricia is an author of the #1 best-selling book, Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. Tricia, welcome to the Daily Fit Podcast. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. So good to be here with you, Sun Moon.
Thank you so much. It's good to have you. We're so happy to have you. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that I think many of us out there might know a little bit about, which is emotional eating. So, Tricia, let's go over what is emotional eating for those that, quote unquote, might not understand what it is. Quarantine, stressful situations, got to get some food. Let's talk a little bit about what emotional eating is and how it comes about in individuals.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think especially with the quarantine, people who maybe had never really thought of themselves as emotional eaters are starting to at least understand the concept, because I've had friends who literally used to pat me on the back and say, "That's great work that you're doing," having no relation at all to what I do, not really even getting it. And then they're calling me like, "Tricia, I can't stop eating," or "Tricia, I'm bringing foods in the house that I cannot, get I can't let go of." And so all of a sudden they're realizing that they're eating when they are not hungry, which is definitely a sign of emotional eating. They're eating to quell anxiety, to just sort of comfort themselves. And, people have heard of the term comfort eating, and that's really probably a good way to describe it, is that, we don't need the foods that we're eating, they're not salads that we're overeating on, or we're turning to when we want comfort. They're carbs, they're sugary snacks, they're nuts, they're snacky things, ice cream, bowls of cereal, And the problem with emotional eating is that it kind of takes on a life of its own. So, you might want a little comfort from a little ice cream, but then it turns into more ice cream. Or then, I always wanted with sugar, I wanted something salty. So then you get some chips, and it
Right.
just becomes this free-for-all that, an hour later, you're sort of coming to, if you will, and you're like, what did I just do? And so I think I think people more than ever are doing that right now because there's so much, uncertainty and anxiousness in the air. Nobody on the planet has a game plan for this thing that we're going through. And so, our lives have been turned upside down. It's sort of it's a global trauma, really, that you can walk out of your house and get sick, or die. And it's just raising our level of insecurity and fear. And, our routines are thrown up in the air because we're no longer going to work. We have to work from home, and then we're staring at a stockpiled kitchen. So there's a lot going on right now that is leading to just sort of mindless snacking and eating for comfort. So that's really what emotional eating is about, is eating over our emotions, essentially stuffing our emotions with food.
Now, Tricia, how long again has it that you've been working in this field? Or I should say this would be your passion work, like 20 years, 25 years, I think?
It's actually been a little over 30 years, about 32 years. It's just hard to believe. So my entire adult life, basically, by age 21, I was 50 pounds overweight. And that was because I was an emotional eater. And the funny thing is that for years growing up, I thought I just liked food. That's a weird term, emotional eating. I just like food. But once the seed was planted, I started to really see that there was something not normal about the way that I ate. I'd go out to lunch with friends and they'd have a sandwich with some fries and they'd eat their sandwich and pick up their fries, but I would eat my fries and pick up my sandwich. So anything that was sort of yummy and carby and greasy like that, I just loved that. So, my experience is a lot of people like me kind of are carb and sugar addicts. So, or just they go overboard with that. But to answer your question, over 30 years, I've been helping people with this problem and, all based on my own experience of having overcome it. And addictive eating, I find to be the hardest of all the addictive habits because you have to eat 3 times a day. Like you can't just put the plug in the jug like you would with alcohol. You literally have to take the tiger out of the cage, pet the kitty, and then gingerly put it back in the cage 3 times a day without it tearing your butt off. So that's why it's so hard. And that's why I am so passionate about helping people, because I've overcome it and I want so much for other people to have that sense of freedom around food.
I can identify with what you're saying because I'm kind of like you. I go again for the French fries first.
Yeah.
That was always my thing, going for those French fries, and then, like you said, the sandwich. Our attachment to food as a culture, as a society, spans for as long as human beings have been wrapped in flesh. Historically, what has changed about our diets and our relationship to food itself that leads us to sometimes unhealthy connections with food?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the evolution of our food sources changed dramatically. The fact that, we've had processed foods and like overabundance of processed foods starting in maybe the 70s. Before that, but really just as a part of our steady diet in the 70s, 60s and 70s. And so everything is processed. The nutrients in our foods has gone way down. The nutrients in our soil has gone way down. And so, not to mention the added sugar, in so many foods that aren't even meant to be sugary foods, like pasta sauce or salad dressings, and other types of things that should not have. The frozen vegetables, so much of the time they're putting sugar in that too. It's crazy. And they're doing, unfortunately, manufacturers are doing that because we'll buy more. The sweeter it is, the tastier it is, the more we'll buy it. And it's just, it's smart business for them. But unfortunately, we're hooked on it. We're absolutely hooked on it. The taste of sweet. The more sugar you eat, the more not only you physically want, because sugar is highly addictive, but also just our taste buds, just get neutralized, and we have to have more and more of it. Not to mention, just as an addiction, sugar is one of the most addictive substances there is. It's been proven to be more addictive than heroin and cocaine. And we need more of it in order to get the same awakening or lighting up of our pleasure center in our brain.
Is it true that 98% of our diets fail? And if that is true, why?
Yeah, that's absolute. That's the statistic, 95 to 98%. It's awesome to me. I totally understand. I get it. It makes total sense to me. But I think people don't, I'm in this industry of, diet, exercise, self-help, health, and all that. And And it's a pretty common knowledge that 98% of all diets fail. In my opinion, of course there are many reasons, but to me the number one reason is because diets, they're really treating the symptom of the problem, and overweight is a symptom of overeating. Okay, so people are trying to lose weight without addressing the fact that they're eating too much. So, okay, let's say they get it, like, oh, I'm eating too much, so I'm gonna eat less. Well, that's not sustainable because overeating is a symptom of what's eating me, And so if that is not addressed, if I just eat less so that I lose weight, the reasons why I ate more and gained weight, if that's not addressed, it's only a matter of time before I eat more again. And so to me, emotional eating is the number one reason why 98% of all diets fail. And time again, I talk to people all day long, Sun Moon, who they have been on countless diets. They have been for decades going on diets. And I was the same way. And we tend to have a bit of amnesia, we forget how many we've been on, and we're just in the moment, we're thinking, how do I get this weight off? This is so uncomfortable. My pants don't fit. I feel gross. I've been at home eating, let me go on another diet, or maybe this new thing that's coming down the pike is my secret cure, but they've never really looked at their track record. How many diets have you actually been on? How many times have you said, this is it. This is going to be my one thing. And if somebody is an emotional eater it doesn't matter what they do. And it doesn't matter what the science is. Like, intermittent fasting, there's amazing science around that. Keto, amazing science. Paleo, cutting grains out of your diet. That's all good science, and still, if somebody's an emotional eater, they can only eat healthy for a period of time. And then those buried emotions, those things that they were using food to bury, that comes bubbling up, and they're just crawling the walls and needing a fix again. And that, the salads aren't doing it, the healthy foods aren't doing it. And then they turn to the heavier foods, the sugar and the fat and the carby foods.
I totally have had the experience with clients and friends and individuals that'll come to me because my background is as a physical trainer. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I see, or rather I should say I dislike about the word diet, or rather the way that it is proposed to us, is the fact that it's always a means to a physical end. Lose weight, gain weight. It's very linear. And whenever I have clients come to me, one of the first things I say to them is the fact of, first, let's change our method of thinking about what is diet. Diet is something that will last us our entire lives. It's not just something you jump on because you want to have a short-term change in your body. If we're going to eat, we have to eat to survive. So what's the best physical diet for us that will sustain our lives as well as help us to lead the type of lives that we want to live? And once I have that conversation with them, you can start to see where you're talking about that emotional trauma and connection to food, or maybe how they're ignorant to what's going on where it comes to their emotional connection to food.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I mean, I'm always trying to get people off of that diet mentality, like these foods are good, these foods are bad. If I eat this way, I'm good. If I eat that way, I'm bad. Mm-hmm. And yeah, if you go on a diet, the problem with it is you end up going off the diet. So it's much better to find a way of eating that works for your body. And it's not one size fits all. Our bodies are all unique and individual. So we have to find what works for us. But that has to include, also, in my experience, that diet has to be based on a deeper process of coming to not needing certain foods. So my experience is if you deal with those underlying causes, and I'm happy to talk about 3 top emotions that really drive emotional eating, but point is, if you deal with those emotions, you won't need the foods as much, as you needed them before. You won't need the heavy carbs. You won't need the grains as much. You won't need as much, ooey gooey chewy in your diet as you did before, because you're not needing to cover those things up. So just to kind of talk about those 3 emotions, in my experience and research, there's 3 primary drivers of overeating. And, it's an oversimplification, and these emotions are kind of umbrellas for more, a bigger, number or list of emotions. But this makes it easy. I call it the PEP test. And this makes it easy for somebody to just start checking in with themselves and identifying whether there's kind of an emotional component to what they're reaching for, or why they keep going to the refrigerator like 10 times a day to see if anything new has been put in there. So, we know what food does to us. Like, we know if I eat, chips every day, we're probably going to gain weight. If we eat a bowl of ice cream or 2 bowls of cereal every night, it's going to start to show. And if we gain enough weight, we're going to have autoimmune issues or diabetes or, heart issues or joint issues. But, oftentimes we don't think about what food is doing for us. And that's where this PEP test comes in. So what the PEP test does, it identifies what we're using food for. So food, number 1, the first P in PEP is a painkiller. We use food as a painkiller to kill emotional pain, and a pandemic is pretty painful,
Very true.
Yeah. And then, of course, having somebody be sick on account of it, extremely painful. But then, being trapped at home with family members you normally see, 4 hours a day and not 24 hours a day, that can be painful. So there's a lot of things that can cause emotional pain. Maybe a marriage that stopped working 5 years ago, that you're still trying to make work, that can be painful. So number of reasons why we get into emotional pain, but food is a great painkiller, okay? And if we sit down with a big bowl of mac and cheese, half a pan of brownies, we're not going to feel any pain. We're going to be numbed out. So it works, okay? It's an amazing painkiller. The E in PEP stands for escape. And I can't think of a time when we would like to escape more than when our reality includes a pandemic. Like, we've never been through this before. It's crazy, it's crazy, it's unprecedented, and it's scary. So it's a reality. Like, I remember in the first month, I just kept saying, I cannot believe we're having a pandemic. Like, I can't even wrap my arms around this. What's happening? Right. And so people want to escape because it's a scary reality. And so again, food is amazing as a form of escape. We get our favorite foods, our goodies, and we sit in front of our favorite TV show and we just check out. And that's, food's good for that. So, very true. So pain is one thing, fear, anxiety, uncertainty is another. And then the third P, or the second P, but the third letter in the PEP test is P, which stands for punishment. And this is something that people are less connected to. We think of food as reward, like we use it as reward at the end of a long day or end of a long work week. Times are tough. It's like, I'm going to reward myself with these yummy foods. But for those who lose control, like I did, I could literally pack away 3,000 calories in a sitting, and then I felt totally disgusting and bad about myself and just, I had crumbs down my front, and then the next day I wouldn't want to be seen. I wouldn't want to, certainly, no libido whatsoever, sex only with the lights off, and that is a form of punishment, okay? So even though we start out by rewarding ourselves, when we go overboard, it seems we've beaten ourselves up, like we've had the opposite effect, okay? We've abused our bodies with food by eating too much. It's terribly abusive when we keep binging and gain weight. It's like our bodies are more, in front of us. So why would we do that? Well, my experience is emotional eaters tend to feel guilt very easily, more than your average person. So we're prone to guilt. We're prone to feeling bad. We're prone to replaying conversations in our heads and thinking, like, what did she mean by that? Or why did he say that? Or, we're easily offended and hurt, and we're just sensitive. So we feel guilt very easily, feel like we've done something wrong, and oftentimes we have. Like, we tend to be very critical of others or judgmental of others just as much. It really stems from being critical of ourselves, and others get the spillover. But point is, guilt drives us to eat as well, is to beat ourselves up with food. So pain, fear, and guilt those are the three main drivers of emotional eating. And the guilt thing people might not relate to as much right now, but it just suffices to say that as emotional eaters, we are highly emotional and we respond to our emotions with food. So if people can just kind of check in, take the PEP test, when they keep wandering into the kitchen and start to look a little deeper, like what's really going on here? Like why do I have this nervous energy that I feel like food is going to solve?
Hey everyone, we hope that you're enjoying the interview thus far. We'd just like to take some quick time out to remind everybody to like, follow, share, and subscribe. With every like, follow, share, and subscription, it helps the Daily Fit podcast to grow. And the more we grow, the more information we can bring to you, the listener. So please, take some time out, like, follow, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
And you can check in, like, what am I having feelings of fear? Like, or did I have a conversation with somebody that didn't go well that I have sort of residual feelings about? And making those connections, with our food cravings and what's going on in our lives is going to take somebody, down the runway so much further because now we can get somewhere, because we can do something about those emotions. There's so many other solutions for those emotions besides burying them with food. But until we start to tune into the fact that there is an emotional component, obviously we're just going to keep beating our heads against the wall or keep doing diets that aren't going to get to the root cause.
Tricia, you said something that I thought was really interesting, and this is something that's curious. Do you think that because of the over-processed food that we're eating, I know you said that emotional eaters can be sensitive. Do you think that the over-processed foods themselves can also help to intensify that sensitivity that they have? Almost as though it's manipulating our genes or our bodies to be more sensitive, which in a sense will make them go back to the food. Like you said, sugar is highly addictive. I'm just curious as to your thoughts on this. Do you think this is also a possibility?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's no redeeming qualities to the chemicals in our foods. It's just, obviously the closer to nature our food is, organic foods that are not processed, foods that are still in their natural form, vegetables, meats, things that are just as close to where they came from to begin with, the better. Because every additive in our food, every bit of chemicals, I think does mess with our brain chemistry and our body chemistry. And I absolutely think that, in order to really feel at our best and to feel healthy and energetic, I think, the closer we are to clean eating and eating from its, food from its natural source, the better. Because there's no redeeming qualities to chemicals and the things they put in our foods. It's crap.
An emotional eater and a food addict, is there a difference?
Great question. My experience is that everybody has, I think God made us to have some kind of emotional connection with food. So I just say to kind of let people off the hook or let them just sort of kind of level the playing field. I say, hey, look, we're probably all emotional eaters. Like everybody has the proclivity for going overboard now and then because food's tasty. It's yummy, it's tasty, and it is comforting. And I feel like if there wasn't that emotional component to food at all, we might just say, not interested, I'm not going to do it. And that obviously wouldn't, bode well for our species. So I think there's some kind of emotional connection that's normal and natural. We're meant to enjoy our food. But it's really what I see as a spectrum, okay? We're on the low end of the spectrum is emotional eating. On the high end of the spectrum is food addiction. And I was definitely there, okay? Like again, sitting down for a big binge of 3,000 calories, not normal eating. That's addictive eating. And it's not addictive eating where I just do that once in a while. The problem with food addiction is you don't know when you're going to stop. You don't have control. So you could have a binge and wake up the next day and say, that's it. That was gross. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to lose 5 pounds. And if you can do that, if you can get up and lose, 5 pounds, for the next week, jog an extra 2 miles and totally cut sugar out of your diet, you probably have some level of control. But for somebody who the next day they do it all over again, or they're having trouble getting off the couch and, out, in their jogging clothes, they have less control. So the difference between an emotional eater and a food addict, in my experience, is really determined by how much control you have, like how much you can course correct if you go off the trail a little bit. And also what level of consequence you have from your eating. Okay, so we're talking about control and consequences. So if you can course correct, if you have some control, you go on a cruise and you gain 5 pounds because there's so much yummy food and it's a free-for-all, and you drink too much and you're feeling like, geez, I really need to, trim down, and you can, and that's the end of it until a year later you go on another cruise, you're on the low end of the spectrum. If, however, those 5 pounds turn into 10 pounds, which turn into 20 pounds, and it's not, it's 6 months of kind of going off the rails and feeling gross and then getting depressed and then hiding out, and only wearing spandex because that's all you can fit into, that's a problem, and that's more addictive eating. And if you're eating and your weight is causing you to really start to pile up consequences. Like I said, autoimmune issues, joint issues, depression, anxiety, just kind of having a lack of passion for life, having a lack of energy, not being able to get up and exercise, like just like totally letting go of your exercise routine. That's where it gets into more of an addictive quality, because you don't have control to pull yourself out of it, and you're piling up consequences on account of it.
How does one gain control of this addictive behavior? I know we just talked about the over-processed food. I would imagine it be very difficult, just like a person who's coming off of a drug addiction. So what are some of the things that a person can do to, one, recognize? One, you already talked about the PEP test. So that's one thing they can use to recognize. But what after that can they do? Because I can imagine this is extremely difficult.
It is difficult. And I always tell people that, if this is a perpetual problem, like if you've been on several diets over the years, and you've yo-yoed with your weight, gotten control and then lost control, gotten control, lost control, and I used to be a yo-yoer where I'd gain 20 pounds, lose 10 pounds, gain 5, lose it all, then slowly put it back on again. And it was just, that's the way it went for me for years. If somebody is like that, chances are they're an emotional eater or a food addict, and you can't overcome it on your own. And again, I talked about this being the hardest habit to overcome, because you have to eat, and because overeating is socially acceptable. Binging, pigging out, eating, Ben and Jerry's, when you're feeling sad, it's pretty socially acceptable. We all laugh about it, but for some people it gets dark, and so pulling out of that on your own is unlikely. So definitely getting support. And it's funny, Sun Moon, because so many people feel so embarrassed that they have this and that they can't control it. There's so much shame around this problem, and especially, if somebody's really fit and goes to the gym, and nobody would ever guess they got out of control of food because they look great. I've talked to men who, they work out for 2-3 hours a day in the gym, but part of that is or they're triathletes or whatever. Part of that is they're trying to, offset their binges, or their out of control eating. So there's a lot of shame. It's a very isolating condition where you don't want anybody to really know what's happening. And the more isolated you are, the more you don't talk about it, the more, it grows. Because, just we're as sick as our secrets, and that secretive nature of it just compounds the problem. So I say, look, you don't have any shame about getting a trainer, if you want to be in tip-top condition, right? Or you're training for pro, athleticism or whatever. You don't have any issues having people who are tennis pro jocks, whatever, tennis players or whatever, Djokovic or any of the other guys or women, Serena or anybody else. They don't have any issues having 1, 2, 3 coaches so they can be in their top performance level. Why would we feel embarrassed about getting a coach about our eating? It's just, there's this psychology that this is something I should be able to do on my own. But, if we're not, then we need help. And there's no shame in that whatsoever. As I said, it's the hardest thing to overcome. So, I would say definitely stop trying to do it on your own. Let go of that pride, because you're in really good company if you can't control your eating, like jillions of people on the planet can't, and they're struggling. I mean, it's 40% of people in our country, in the U.S., are overweight or obese, almost 50%. So it's a big problem for a lot of people. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out for help. And somebody's looking for a place to start. Definitely sugar is a good place to start, cutting sugar out of your diet. Again, no redeeming qualities to sugar. Absolutely no redeeming qualities. Like, it's bad for us in every possible way, not to mention the addictive quality of it, where it ends up causing overeating. On occasion, I do a sugar challenge or quit sugar challenge, to help people get off of sugar. And that's just sort of like a baseline. That'll just help. That won't solve emotional eating. Like, you can cut sugar out and still manage to overeat on things that don't have sugar in them, but it's a good place to start in just feeling better, getting more energy. But if somebody has trouble quitting sugar, it's probably an emotional eating issue. So I will also say that I always recommend to people in terms of eating, as I mentioned earlier, intermittent fasting is kind of a big fad right now. And the science is there for, the effects for longevity and health. But for somebody who's an emotional eater, oftentimes when they go back to eating, let's say they don't eat for 18 hours, if they go back to eating, they might go overboard and binge eat or eat really unhealthy foods during that window that they're eating. And so I just say to people, if you want to really feel more control around food, get real simple about it and eat 3 meals with nothing in between. Just 3 meals with nothing in between is going to really just sort of, it's going to be so healthy for the body. You've got time to digest between meals. And chances are you're going to start really recognizing emotional eating if you are an emotional eater, because it'll be hard not to snack, and then you can start to address that. But I call it 3 meal magic. And it's just especially now that we're holed up, you at home with stockpiled food and we're like staring at the kitchen all the time, just having very clear cut meal times is really helpful. Like just, eat a good solid breakfast, at lunch and dinner, but in between meals, close the kitchen. Just be like, this psychologically speaking is closed to me. Like that's just not my place, be anywhere but the kitchen in between meals. And just having more of a routine around eating can really help kind of ground you and get just feeling more stable around food.
Tricia, I'm curious. I tend to tell a lot of my clients when they're talking about sweets and sugar, I try to tell them to replace that with maybe fruits, more natural based sugar sources instead of the white sugar or processed sugar. Is there a difference? Is that better? Is that some good quality information to give to them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Fruit, in moderation is healthy. And if somebody's going overboard with fruit, it's better than going overboard with processed sugar for sure. Right. Because nobody's just eating spoonfuls of white sugar. So it's like, it's not just the sugar, it's all the chemicals and everything else that they might be eating along with the sugar. So yeah, transitioning to fruit is great. I'm a big fan of stevia, the sweetener stevia. I feel like it's God's gift to emotional eaters, because you can really sweeten things like your coffee, and tea and yogurt and almond milk or any kind of milk. You can sweeten it with stevia. I think that's a great swap because there's no real adverse side effects of stevia. And in liquid form is my favorite. You can get it in powdered form as well. But if it clumps up like in yogurt and you get a mouthful of it, it's bad. It's really yucky tasting. But I do love stevia. That's my friend. It comes in other flavors as well. So you could literally switch off of sodas if you're kind of into sodas and you shouldn't be drinking sodas. You can get, bottles of carbonated water, and there's flavored stevias like orange or cola or root beer flavored stevias that you can just drop into carbonated water and boom, you've got a flavored soda. It's incredible. So I just find that to be really good. But there's other good sweeteners now too. There's erythritol and xylitol and monk fruit and other things as well. I just find stevia to be the easiest to get a hold of, and it doesn't erythritol and xylitol and other sugar alcohols is what they call them. They don't have sugar or alcohol in them, but they're called sugar alcohols because they're sweeteners, and they can sometimes cause gut distress. For me, they give me gas. So I just love stevia. It's just so easy to use and just do those swaps. But some fruit as well. Again, a smoothie, with a little bit of fruit, some berries or something in it, definitely better than going the sugar route. But I have a sweet tooth, so stevia has enabled me to eat things that taste sweet without actually eating sugar.
I also have a sweet tooth. I really know what you're talking about. I find it interesting. One of the things that you were saying is the fact of it's all the other chemicals that they're adding. So it is so distressful that in these times of what's going on, that these other chemicals are being used to alter us. I mean, I find it very, very disturbing and distressing. Give us 3 tips that you would like the listeners to take away from this interview. Somebody that might be suffering from emotional eating or might just be sitting down right now. They're listening. They're like, you know what? I'm in quarantine. I can't get out. I see that bag of chips and I'm getting ready to grab those Oreos. Help us out.
Sure. Well, first, I just say if anybody could just write down, it's not about the food. It's not about the food. So even though you think it's about the Oreos, if you keep eating those Oreos, if you keep going back to those, there's something else going on. Of course, you might be just addicted to the sugar in them because you've been eating them, but also it's not about the food. And just know that there's something deeper going on, and there are emotions underneath those eating habits. So that's one thing. Also, just realizing that you can't just remove foods that you love from your diet because there's going to be something left. Like you're basically, as I said, food is a cover up for pain, fear, and guilt and other emotions. So if you just take the food, if you just try to clear a diet of these foods, then you're just going to have a lot of emotions, and you've got to have substitutes for the food. Like you just can't go cold turkey without having a different solution. So I say start your day with some kind of centering and meditation practice. So meditation, prayer, maybe going for meditative walk or doing a yoga routine or poses, something, maybe spiritual readings, from the Bible or from other inspirational, like one day, every day a new inspirational message or something, create like a little ritual in the morning where you can get centered and still and quiet and really just sort of find who you are, find who your God is, or what inspires you spiritually, and connect with that. And then bring that way. If you start your day that way, instead of reading text, jumping in the shower, or jumping on email, if you start your day with that spiritual practice, and you don't have to believe in God or anything to do it. It's just something, even a walk in nature, something that centers you and makes you feel connected to a bigger whole, where it's not just you're not isolated, it's not all up to you, that you can bring throughout your day and draw on that. I refer to it as putting money in the bank. So make a deposit first thing in the morning by really connecting with your spiritual source. And then later in the day, when times get tough, when you're feeling stressed, when, people have been tugging at you all day long, you can draw on that, and maybe go back to that, spend 5 minutes, in another meditation or reading something spiritual, because that getting centered and still and quiet is something you can draw on during the day. And that's going to make it so much easier to resist foods that, are tempting to you, basically. And that can really help. So, I don't know, those are a couple things. I think one more thing I would say is boost your oxytocin, get connected with friends or with a coach, somebody with community. In my program, I have actually private community where everybody can kind of cheer each other on or reach out if they're struggling or whatever. You got to get connected and really get those oxytocin levels up, because, that's going to feed our soul. My business is called Heal Your Hunger, because we're hungry for something much deeper. We're hungry for connection. We're hungry for soul food. And we have to get that not only from our spiritual practices, but from connecting with one another. I believe that's what we're here to do, is support each other, through our trials in life, and this is an especially hard time right now. So more than ever, we need to feed our souls with connection and community.
Tricia Nelson, thank you for coming to the podcast. I appreciate you for taking this time out to educate our listeners and help them where they need help. Where can people contact you, reach out to you with your social media?
Absolutely. My business is called Heal Your Hunger, and you can go to healyourhunger.com, and you can actually take a quiz. I forgot to mention, if you want to find out if you're an emotional eater or food addict and where you are on the spectrum, you can actually take a free quiz, which will tell you exactly where you are on that spectrum at healyourhunger.com. Also on Instagram, Heal Your Hunger, or Tricia Nelson. I think it's Tricia Nelson Love, my personal Instagram account. And also I have a free group on Facebook called The Secret Sauce to End Emotional Eating Now. So you can just look that up on Facebook and join that group for all kinds of tips and classes, free classes and prizes and that kind of thing. It's really a fun place to find support.
Tricia, thank you for coming to the show. I wish you a happy, healthy day, and I hope we can have you back again to talk to our listeners and educate them more on emotional eating. This is something I think that is very, very important that we all should be more familiar with. I don't think that we get as much knowledge about eating and our emotions as we need.
Amen. Thanks so much for having me, Sunmu, and it's such a pleasure, and thanks for the amazing work you do in the world to support people in being healthy.
Thank you. We'll be back after these messages. Hey, you, with the earbuds in their ear. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? When I was trying to get my podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions. How do I record an episode? How do I get my show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other places people like to listen? How do I make money from my podcast? The answer to every one of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors too, so you can get paid to podcast. I like to upload my episodes directly to the app and then promote. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast, make money doing it. Go to anchor.fm/start to join me in the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast.